Welcome. It's Tuesday. We are starting chapter 10 today. So we are finished. Anything we did Monday was chapter 9. You will have a quiz Wednesday just over chapter 9 stuff. Think market economy, ear canal. If you took the notes, studied, you should be good. Okay, so chapter 10 is a long chapter. It's probably one of the longest for the semester. Okay, the first part has to do with the age of Jackson. Okay, so let's just go ahead and knock it out. So what we're really going to focus on first is comparing and contrasting basically Jefferson versus Jackson. And then how did the election of 1824 change things? Okay, remember technically there's only one political party at this time, the Democratic Republicans. However, you will see that they've kind of splintered. So I just want to point out that y'all know that Hartford Convention after the War of 1812 led to the demise of the Federalist Party. And so you just have one political party, the Democratic Republicans. I want to point out, though, you have like a new faction, if you will, starting in the election of 1824. While you still only have one political party, the Democratic Republicans, inside of that, you have like the Democratic Republicans who represent Jackson, and then the others who are the National Republicans. Okay, but again, only one political party, but you can tell the fact that there's two splinter groups inside of the Democratic Republicans show you in just a couple of years, there will be two official parties. The Democratic Republicans will eventually form the Whig Party, but that's not until after Jackson's president. Okay, so let's talk about the election of 1824. Okay, remember, there's only one political party, the Democratic Republicans, and inside of that, you have some people like John Quincy Adams. He's a National Republican, and Henry Clay is a National Republican. But again, they're all Democratic Republicans. Okay, and this is where it gets a little sketchy. But long story short, Andrew Jackson wins most of the electoral votes and most of the popular votes. However, there is no majority of electoral votes winner, and the Constitution says it will now go to the House of Representatives. Okay, so let's go ahead and take some notes. Don't take too much. Okay, but we already talked about how the Republican Party, the Democratic Republicans, they're coming apart with little splinterings. You know, some people focus more on industry and tariffs, and some are focusing more on cotton and westward expansion. Okay, and you will see that the culture will really change, especially after the election of 1824. It's going to really change to a lot of campaigning. It's more about the person's like personality and stuff, and like identifying with the American people. You'll see there will be a big departure from like past traditions with presidents. Okay, all right. So let's make sure we know this. First thing, put John Quincy Adams. Background information, main thing I would put, okay, is he was Secretary of State. Now we're going to go to number 2, Andrew Jackson. He represents the West. He was the first president to be born in a log cabin. Okay, and what I would put here, you know, is that Battle of New Orleans is what really got him on the map. He's a military general, and then after that, he did the Seminole Wars. Okay, then number 3 from the West, you have Kentucky guy Henry Clay, who is Speaker of the House at this time. Pretty convenient. Remember, he is a war hawk, and he's all about that American system. Then you have John C. Calhoun from South Carolina. He is a war hawk from the War of 1812. The last person, William Crawford from the South, from Georgia. Okay, and he was, you know, Secretary of War for someone and stuff. You don't have to know all those details. Okay, but here's what you do need to know. Okay, for the results, and this is strictly the electoral votes. Okay, John Quincy Adams got second place in the electoral vote, so just put second for results for him. Andrew Jackson got first place. He had the most electoral votes. Then third place, William Crawford. Okay. Remember, there was no electoral majority. So according to the Constitution, it goes to the House of Representatives to decide. And they will decide between the top three. That's why you only needed to know those three. So John C. Calhoun and, Henry Clay and, okay. So again, where does it go to be decided? The House of Representatives. Who's Speaker of the House at this time? Henry Clay. Okay. So, some people think that Henry Clay might have used his political power. He's probably one of the first Speaker of the Houses who really uses his power. Maybe a little too much, but hey, uses his power. Okay. So let's go to the results now. Jackson won the plurality of the popular vote, and the plurality meaning the most electoral votes, but he lacked a majority. Adams came in second. Crawford came in third. Okay. Since there was no majority of electoral votes, the House of Representatives will decide. Okay. Remember, I told you the House will choose between three candidates. Well, what's going to happen is William Crawford's going to suffer a stroke, unfortunately, and he will be severely paralyzed, and so he will drop out. So now it's just between Jackson and John Quincy Adams. Okay. And remember, who is Clay? He is the Speaker of the House. So Clay, as Speaker of the House, influences supporters. Okay. And will convince the people in the House to choose John Quincy Adams. And I just always do JQA for short. As long as it's like quizzes and tests, John Quincy Adams, okay? And here's what's sketchy. So the House of Representatives, which he's in charge of, Clay is, voted, and they selected who won the majority of electoral votes in the House? John Quincy Adams. Well, John Quincy Adams will then appoint Henry Clay to be his Secretary of State. Remember, I told you how being Secretary of State is like a stepping stone to the presidency. It's like the most important cabinet position. Okay. And a lot of people will cry basically foul, and they will call the results of the election of 1824 as a corrupt bargain. Because again, a lot of people are saying, oh, John Quincy Adams and Henry Clay must have met somewhere behind closed doors and said like, hey, if you promise to make me Secretary of State, I'll promise to swing the votes, all that kind of stuff. Henry Clay was very ambitious. We don't know to this day if that happened, but what we do know is that those Democrats, like the Democrat Republicans, the Jacksonians, they feel that they were robbed from this. Because remember, he won the most votes electorally and with the popular vote. Yet when the House of Representatives chose, they did not choose him. And so they're going to cry foul, and it will haunt John Quincy Adams' presidency. Okay. And Calhoun will end up being John Quincy Adams' vice president. Very, very ambitious guy. So in this little picture right here, I want you to draw a really angry Andrew Jackson, or write out something. And something about like, I can't believe, the Clay must have rigged this. I want to get John Quincy Adams back in 1828, something like that. So again, remember, it's just that corrupt bargain. Make sure you associate the election of 1824 with the corrupt bargain. It is super, super important. Remember, I told you it's so bad, it leaves a bad taste in Jackson and his followers' mouths that they're like, nope. We are breaking away from the Democratic Republicans. We are starting our own party now, making sure we are not even associated with the National Republicans. We're be called the Democrats. And the Democrat Party that's around today, the founder is Jackson, because the election of 1824. So now let's talk about John Quincy Adams, and this is his the first president to be photographed. Okay, how many terms did he serve? 1. Okay. His popularity will decline mainly because, people thought he was corrupt. He struck a deal with that corrupt bargain of 1824. Okay. He and Clay, remember, what's their faction called? Not the Democratic Republicans, inside of the Democratic Republicans, National Republicans. Eventually, in the 1830s, the National Republicans will evolve into an actual political party, the Whigs. Okay, and y'all know that's WIGS. John Quincy Adams was very, very serious. He was very religious. Okay, he was a little bit of an aristocrat, so a little elite. Okay, and his nickname was Old Man Eloquent, like he's Mr. Fancy. Okay, that's not going to be really good during this time where more poor whites are going to have more power, they're not going to identify with this elitist, basically. Because remember, I told you Jackson has 4 years to basically paint a picture that this guy is an elitist, and just really slander his name. And so a lot of the common white men are not going to identify with John Quincy Adams. Okay. He is a National Republican. Remember, I told you the National Republicans will eventually form into the Whig Party. So he loves that American system. He wants the federal government to spend money on internal improvements. He wants, another tariff, all this kind of stuff. So Adams will support internal improvements. Again, it's part of the American system. Okay. And he believes, since he's a National Republican, which again, later is Whigs, he believes who should pay for the internal improvements? Federal money. Okay. Federal money. Jackson will really look at every little thing that John Quincy Adams signs off on. Like there's this observatory, like look up the stars and stuff. And he's like, that's ridiculous. That should not be federal money. Okay. But John Quincy Adams believes it can be. Okay. But the number one thing you better know is he will sign into law the Tariff of Abominations. A lot of people get confused. He signs it into law, not Jackson. John Quincy Adams signs it into law. Okay. This tariff is also known as the Tariff of 1828. The official name is Tariff of 1828. The opponents would call it the Tariff of Abominations. And I think about the abominable snow monster, like in the claymation reindeer, Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer, where it's like the horrible snow monster. Okay. We know with tariffs, people in New England and up north, they support it. They love a tariff, especially that textile industry. Okay. Make sure I would circle this, that this tariff was all-time high at this time, 45% tariff. Think how high that is. So again, if I'm ordering $100,000 worth of product, I also have to pay an additional $45,000 to the American government because I did not buy American. That's huge. Okay. Remember, the South has almost no industry. Remember, we talked about this Monday. The Tredegar Iron Works is an example of the industry. So this is going to increase the price they will have to pay if they want to buy a foreign good, because now they have to pay the tariff, and it's a 45% tariff. So they will hate the tariff. Okay. Adams is also against Indian removal. You will see he's very, I kind of think about him and Jimmy Carter, very similar. They both are really focused in on human rights. So he is definitely against Indian removal. He does not believe we should, that he believes that the natives have been here and they deserve the land and they should not have to get kicked out. Okay. What is cool about John Quincy Adams is that he won't win in 1828. Okay. But he will actually be elected to the House of Representatives after he's president. And he does a lot there. He actually serves in the House of Representatives for the state of Massachusetts for 20 years. And he really dedicates a lot of his time in Congress to trying to get rid of slavery. He doesn't get rid of slavery, but he really plays a big role in some things that pertain to slavery, which we'll talk about later in this chapter. Any questions there? Well, I'm used to asking questions. Okay, so this cartoon right here, I use it every year. I love it. I think this cartoon really depicts the Tariff of 1828, that Tariff Abominations. Remember, tariffs hurt the South because they chose not to have much industry. So if they want to buy a manufactured good, they can buy from the North or they can buy from a foreign country, but they have to pay a 45% tariff. So you see up here, there's the South right here. So this is the Southern guy. He looks like he's shriveled up and mad and, starving. And then this Northern guy, he's pleasantly plump. He's doing well. Okay. And can you see how this Southern guy looks like he has this burden and it says tariff, 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 taxes, taxes, taxes. So this is a burden to him. He can barely survive. He's, shrinking by the day. And then this guy's just loving the tariffs. He's living good. So you see, it's tariffs help the North at the expense of the South. And especially if it's a 45% tariff, that really is pretty ridiculous. Okay, so you can see the election of 1827, those Jacksonian Democrats are going to start getting more and more power. It's just, a way, a time bomb until the election of 1828 for John Quincy Adams. Okay, so let me clarify a couple of things. I already told you that the results of the election of 1824, that corrupt bargain, is really going to change how people see politics. They said that this broken system, this power-hungry Clay and the Speaker of the House and stuff, they changed the system and used it to their advantage. So it's the idea that, like, if more younger, like poor white males had a say in this government, this corrupt bargain would never have happened. So because of this election of 1824, a lot of poor whites will really demand something that's already been happening. In Western states, we're talking Missouri, Illinois, Indiana, okay, Western states, Missouri, Illinois, Indiana, starting in the 18 teens, they allow all universal white male suffrage. So if you're a white male, you can vote, and if you're a certain age. They get rid of the religious requirement. They get rid of the property owning requirement, okay? This is out west, okay? But people hear about it and they start to think, this election of 1824 was rigged, and we demand that we get universal white male suffrage over here in the eastern part of America, because they felt like this wouldn't have happened if they had suffrage, those poor white males, okay? So what's going to happen is that voting for president rose. Okay, so 350,000 people voted in 1824 in that election, okay? In 1840, so 16 years later, 2.4 million people will vote. That's basically almost a 7-fold increase in 16 years, all because of that universal white male suffrage, okay? Did Jackson start this? No. The first state to get universal white male suffrage was 1816. Jackson was fighting the Seminole Wars at that time, okay? But he kind of embraces it, and especially after the election of 1824, he says, look, this election doesn't represent the common man. Because of those elections, more people are going to demand it. So he does not grant universal white male suffrage. Okay, please just it basically was something that was going on at the time, and he will capitalize off of it. Like, yes, I support this, but he did not give it to people. Okay. All right, so just note, if there's one word to associate with the election of 1828, it is going to be mudslinging. Okay, mudslinging is like throwing dirt. In the past, it was like, a little bit of campaign, nothing crazy. And then 1824, because politics will get bigger and bigger, they'll start to have rallies with free drinks and free food. Okay, now though, there's going to be even more slandering, because again, the election of 1824, Jackson's men, they've had basically 4 years. They're ready for this. And they will really accuse Adams of some things. And then Adams will go on the basically defense and then offense, attacking Jackson. It's a really dirty, a really nasty thing. And a lot of it has to do with because campaigning is going to be really big in the election of 1828. Okay. So for instance, Adams' campaign group, they were passing out these handbills of coffins. And so during the Seminole Wars, I believe that General Andrew Jackson, there were some deserters. So Americans who went AWOL, absent without leave, in the American military. They found him and then he killed them. And so those are those coffins that represent his murdering of these American soldiers. Okay. He was a slave trader. So, some people who might be abolitionists wouldn't like Jackson. Okay. And his wife was a bigamist. Okay. So his wife was Rachel Jackson. Before they got married, she technically had been separated from her husband. They hadn't signed the papers. Well, you got to sign the papers if you want it to be an official divorce. So people will just go after her and it's be like, look who he married. And that's going to really hurt her. But again, she started dating him before she signed the official divorce paper. So technically she was still married so he committed adultery and so did she. Okay. Jackson said that, he represented the people, the common men. Okay. He participated in duels. He had a bullet lodged in his heart from one. He was a big gambler, went to lots of bars. He chewed tobacco. He was an orphan at a very early age. And when he was a teenager, he made money by orchestrating chicken fights. So it's kind of like dog fighting, but he would go in with the chicken and then run, that was him. So he definitely identifies with a lot of people. His group basically said that when Adams was president, that the Tsar from Russia visited America, and he basically provided the Tsar with an American female. So you could basically, they were saying that, John Quincy Adams was a pimp. They were saying that. And then that, like, he used his public funds for gambling, that, Adams gambled some, federal land away, which that was definitely not true, as well as the whole pimp for the Tsar of Russia. That was not true either. But it doesn't matter. It's all about that. So what's going to happen, okay, is the blanks here, okay? The election of 1828 is going to be JQA, so John Quincy Adams versus Jackson. It's a rematch. Okay, we know that the John Quincy Adams will call themselves officially National Republicans, later Whigs. He's accused of making a corrupt bargain with Henry Clay. Farmers, Southerners, Westerners do not like him because he signed into law the Tariff of Abominations. Okay, he also was falsely accused of providing an American prostitute for the Tsar of Russia. Okay, at this time, Andrew Jackson will call themselves the Democratic Republicans. I just shortened it Dem, and then like REP. In parentheses, put Democrats. They'll drop the Republican part to make sure people don't get them confused. Okay. The results. The blank here that you must write. Sectionalism. Okay. John Quincy Adams does really well in New England. But Jackson does really well the South and the West. And Calhoun runs as his VP for Jackson. See how ambitious he is? He was John Quincy Adams' vice president, and now he's going to run for Jackson's vice president. Okay? And again, he's strong in the South and the West. I just shorten it like that. Okay, so Jackson's going to represent what we call the common man. I've already kind of talked to you a little bit about his background. Remember, he actually was the first president not to attend college. He will become a lawyer later. Back then, if you knew the law and like practiced the law of the Constitution, the state laws, all that kind of stuff, and passed the bar, the exam, then you could be a lawyer. So he did not. He was not rich. He was an orphan at a young age. He's born in a log cabin in North Carolina, but his home is Tennessee. Okay. Like I told you, chicken fighter in the military. He is definitely that example of that self-made man. He's definitely rough around the edges. His nickname was Old Hickory. Okay. What is cool here is that to represent, so when he ran, his slogan was, "Let the people rule," which again, he's identifying with those poor white men. Okay. And he does win. Okay. Win them with that. And when he gets inaugurated in March of 1829, he actually invites all of America to his inauguration. He has a big party at the executive mansion. That's what we call the White House back then. And the thing is, though, it's just crazy. The place gets trashed early on. It's so rowdy that someone like tries to attack him, and he and like, I guess you could say the Secret Service run him upstairs, and they're like in hiding. It's just so crazy. People are swinging from the chandeliers. The front lawn is just trashed. And opponents are like, well, we have a new chapter in America. We let the people rule, and by golly, look at what they've already done on day one to the White House with this. And so people refer to this as King Mob. So when you think about his inauguration and the party where everyone's invited, it's like the mob rule has taken over. And look, they've already destroyed the executive mansion, the White House. Okay. So when you see this, just think of King Mob, how everyone, but you see also some people would love this idea that he truly represents everyone because he invited everyone to the White House for the inaugural party. Okay. See, and you can see right here, sectionalism. The South and the West, Jackson does great. Up North, that's where John Quincy Adams does well. That's that sectionalism, that divide. Okay. So let's talk about Jackson. Remember, he represents the common man. Some people call him the common man, like reincarnated, basically. He is often compared to Jefferson because, remember, they're more about the common man. Remember, like Jefferson, when he was inaugurated for his parade, like going to get inaugurated, he did not have a horse and buggy. He walked, and that represented him being common. he's similar yet different to Jackson, and we'll get into that. Remember, Jackson, he will establish the Democrat Party because of that election of 1824. It is the oldest party today. Okay. He promised he would only serve one term. He lied. Okay. Very controversial character. Not only like did he participate in duels, at least 6. One time he got really drunk and like mistook someone and like he was really drunk in an alley, and back then you like walk with a cane. It was the cool thing to do, and he went and like caned someone. This drunk Andrew Jackson in the middle of the night saw someone walking in an alley and caned him. Okay. And what I love, one of my stories that I love, is that when Andrew Jackson died, okay, his parrot was kicked out of Jackson's funeral because the parrot was cussing so much. That just shows you, Jackson was a big cusser. Okay. He's the first Westerner president. Remember, he fought at the Battle of New Orleans and Horseshoe Bend. Before that, you also have the Seminole War. So he is a military hero. Okay. At age 29, he'll be a member of the House of Representatives. That's number 8, House of Representatives. And what is his state? You can just shorten it. Just Tennessee. That is where he lives. That is his home. Even though he might have been born in North Carolina in a log cabin, Tennessee is his home. Okay. Do not worry where it says number 9, like Tennessee. I mean, technically he's a slave owner if you want to put it there. Okay. And his nickname, what was his nickname? Old Hickory. He was rough around the edges. Okay. He was a widower. Okay. So here's what's really, really sad. Rachel Jackson, it ruined her. Those accusations that, John Quincy Adams, and the guy who was really behind it was Henry Clay. Okay. The things that, really hurt her, and sometimes like when you're really stressed out, it physically will take a toll on you. Like there's so much stress and anxiety, it can really make you sick. And remember, the big thing was, she was with a married, like she was dating a married man before she signed her paper. She's basically a little hussy is what everyone's saying. As she's getting fitted for her inauguration gown, she basically passes out and dies. So people think it was like a heart problem. And Jackson is convinced that, Rachel, his wife, would still be alive if it wasn't for Henry Clay and John Quincy Adams' campaign on those accusations. So Jackson's really going to take it out personally on Henry Clay now. He basically blames him for his wife's death. Okay. His wife's name was Rachel. There's the blank there. Okay, we already talked about the inauguration and King Mob, and he definitely was considered a racist. Remember, he was an Indian fighter, so he's not going to like the Indians, and he also owned slaves. Okay, so let's talk about Jacksonian democracy. Okay, when you think about it, not many presidencies have an era named after him, the age of Jackson or Jacksonian democracy. Okay, he believed in a government for the people. And I already told you what was his slogan: "Let the people rule," when he was running for president in 1828. Okay, he really represents that growth of opportunity would allow young men of very modest beginnings through hard work to become, successful. And right there, it's make sure you write self-made man. He's the hero. Okay. Remember, he also will encourage, and during his presidency, it will become a thing, universal white male suffrage, meaning if you're a white male of a certain age, you can vote. He took away the property requirement. And not only could you vote, you can now run for office. So this is expanding democracy for the common white man. Okay, remember, he did not start this. The first state to allow this was in 1816. Okay, he just encourages it for other states, which will happen. Okay, and you can see an example of this, for instance, in hotels, you have these like little cafeterias, and like richer men and poor men will be sharing a table. They now will like share carriage rides and stuff. And it just shows you that like there's that mix, and people are going to be a little more equal in America than in other places. Okay, then because of this, there will be a mass number of voters. And we talked about this from 1824 to 1840 in 16 years. It goes from 350,000 voters to 2.4 million. That's almost 7 times more, than an increase. Okay, so this definitely will be big. And remember, if you could vote, you could run for public office. Okay, another thing, this is not everywhere, but in some places you'll start to have written votes instead of like out in the open, so you truly can vote how you want to. And so this is just in some places you have a secret ballot. Again, not everywhere, just a couple of places. Got to start somewhere. Okay, look at number 6. The end of the nickname is called King Caucus. Okay, a caucus is a secret meeting of top party members. Okay, and this is how you would get the nomination back then for the presidency. This group of, it's invite only, it's secretive, and they would hand pick someone to be. So, for instance, the National Republicans hand-picked John Quincy Adams. The Democratic Republicans hand-picked Jackson in 1824. Okay? Because it's secretive and they hand-pick, it takes away some democracy. So a lot of states are going to get rid of the caucus, and instead they're going to start something that we still continue today, nominating conventions. This is where people from the parties are invited, and they go and they vote for who they want to represent them for their political party in the upcoming election. So the fact that caucuses basically are ended in most places and nominating conventions replace that really enhances and increases democracy. Okay, nominating conventions. The Electoral College. Some people used to be handpicked by the state legislature. Now people have to like earn that spot there. So again, that's another example. All right, and here's an example of here in Rhode Island. Okay, Rhode Island, there's a group of people led by Thomas Dorr, in parentheses, put the Dorrites. Okay, they really want to expand like nominating conventions and the end of caucuses and the secret ballot and all that kind of stuff. And they're really pushing for it. And their state of Rhode Island basically bans it, blocks it. It's like, nope, we're going to make a gag resolution to where you cannot mention any of this stuff. Okay, so what they do is they will try to seize the state arsenal in Rhode Island where the state militia has their weapons and stuff. And they will get imprisoned, and this failed. But what's going to happen is it's going to really raise a lot of awareness, and a lot of politicians will change their minds now, and they're actually going to draft a constitution that will embrace these voting reforms. And it's called the Dorr Rebellion. Okay. Yeah, and you can see right here, they got rid of the property requirements. And then I already told you about the Dorr Rebellion. It actually long-term was successful because they did get even though people were, were in prison and stuff, it did get what it was. By 1856, universal white suffrage for males will be established. But again, did that happen in Jackson's presidency? No, this is way after. Okay, but a lot of states will really start during that time. And again, he did not create all these things. He some people think that he definitely encouraged it and definitely played a role. Some people say, no, it was happening and he just kind of took a lot of credit. Okay, so now we're on the next page of notes. Let's talk about how Jackson is different from Jefferson. Okay, so want to point out that Jefferson believed the nation should be governed by middle and upper class, basically white males, or say white elite property owners. The key word there is elite. There's a definition of the common man for Jefferson has a lot more qualities and caliber than the common man for Jackson. Okay, Jackson believes in universal white, equality for white males. Okay, and parentheses just put common. Okay, and here is, I don't know if you can see this or not, but here's a compare and contrast between Jefferson and Jackson. So this is Jefferson. He viewed education as an important qualification for leaders. So even though Jefferson was worried about the common man, he believed that you should have an education. He believed that the common man shouldn't maybe govern. Maybe they should be able to vote maybe, but not govern, meaning run for office. Okay. He's more of that war hero. Jefferson was not. And he viewed the president as direct representative of the people. He definitely is all about a strong executive branch when Jefferson was more cautious of it. Okay. Both practiced law before politics. Both owned plantations with slaves. Both served on the state level beforehand. They viewed people as equal compared to the other opponents. And they thought the government should protect and serve the citizens. Main difference here is he's all about any white man. And he really believes the executive branch should be strong, 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 strong. Okay. All right. So Jackson is going to support something called the spoils system. Okay. This is one thing that you definitely associate with Jacksonian democracy. He will embrace this. Did he create this? No, but as president, he will establish this. So what's going to happen? There's this very famous phrase called "to the victor belongs the spoils." And that basically is a fancy way of saying the winner gets to call the shots and the loser just has to suck it up, basically. Okay. And it's to the victors belong the spoils. To the victors belong the spoils. Okay. He believed that everyone, if you're a white male, should have the opportunity to serve for the government in some capacity. Okay. And it should not be about if you went to school or not. It should be about if you were loyal to the person who won. Okay. So what Jackson's going to do is he will fire a lot of federal officials, like postmasters, for instance, postal workers and stuff like that, solely because they openly campaigned for John Quincy Adams. And he will replace 10% of all federal jobs with people who were loyal to him. So it's like out with the old and in with the new. And you replace people who weren't loyal to you, who openly campaigned against you, to people who do campaign. You were rewarding people who were loyal for you. And that's the spoil system. And again, did he do this for every single job? No, only for 10% of federal jobs. 10% of federal jobs. Okay. And again, he believed that everyone should, and like you would meet with the president, you would put your name down and say, hey, here's, the money I contributed to your campaign, all that kind of stuff. Okay. He did set a precedent for clean sweeps, meaning like, brand new cabinets, brand new staff members in the White House, all that kind of stuff. He did believe in something called rotations in office, meaning like a lot of people would only serve for one of term. Like just because he serves 2 terms doesn't mean you actually have a job a second term. Because again, if you can say you're only going to work for one of my terms, that allows someone else to work for the other term. So that would have more people involved in the federal government. Okay. So just please, this recap of Jacksonian democracy right here. He's a champion for the common white man. He encourages universal white male suffrage. Okay. As a result, more instead of appointed positions, local and state judges will actually be an election now instead of appointed positions. He is a strict constructionist like Jefferson. He has a strict interpretation. He believes in rotations in office. So, you do not have your job forever because more people need to have a spot. Spoil system, again, that's also called the patronage system. That is where you reward people who were loyal to you. Instead of caucuses, most places, not all, but most will do the nominating conventions. Also, you'll have a third party start to develop. The first third party was called the anti-Masonic third party. There's that. Don't worry too much about that. Campaigning is going to be really big under Jackson because, again, he represents the common man. So a lot of common people will campaign for him. And a lot of mudslinging will be associated with the election of 1828. He distrusts the banks. He was one of those who lost a lot in the second bank in the United States, that Panic of 1819. He will blame the second bank for a lot of his misfortunes. So he does not like the banks. He believes it's unconstitutional. He believes we should not have a debt. Okay. And that's big. The only time in U.S. history where we actually do not have a debt for the federal government is when Jackson's president. So that's pretty cool. Okay. So again, spoil system. Let's see. That's a cartoon right there, the spoil system. This is clearly someone who is making fun of it. This is an opponent, a critic of the spoil system, because it's like it's like a statue, but what is he riding? Like a fat hog. Okay, so it almost looks like he's, abusing power by like getting rid of people just because they were loyal. Because again, let's say I'm supporting Jackson. I get in charge of, the postmaster for Georgia. Do I know anything about the U.S. mail? No, I don't even know how much a stamp costs. I think it's 50 cents right now. I'm not the best person for the job, but I was loyal. So again, a critic would say the best people aren't getting the jobs, but Jackson's like, it's more important that people have the opportunity to get the jobs. Okay. Also want to point out, he did have a cabinet member, like cabinets who he hired and fired and all that kind of stuff. But he had a group of his trusted advisors who were not on his official cabinet. This is more like his drinking and gambling buddies. That's who he really, really listened to. So can you see the tension where like there might be a cabinet member meeting But like the cabinet members know that like whatever they say, Jackson's still going to listen to his little drinking buddies. And that group's going to be called the kitchen cabinet, as like a bad nickname for them, because it's like they're so like different and like not nice and formal that they don't even know you're supposed to enter someone's house through the front door. They just, they're too casual. They enter through the back door, like the kitchen door. There's nothing too much about that. Okay. You know what? We'll do one more, just so we won't be as rushed. Okay. So let's talk about this, the nullification crisis. Remember, we talked about nullification once before with the Alien and Sedition Acts. Okay. This has to do with, so think 1830s, it has to do with the Tariff of 1828. Okay. It's going to be Jackson versus his vice president, who's John C. Calhoun from South Carolina. Okay. And again, what is the nickname for the Tariff of 1828? The Tariff of Abominations. Remember, it was a 45% tariff. That's the highest rate back then, you know. And again, Jackson is against high tariffs, but he understands like the need for moderate tariffs because again, we don't have income taxes. So the number one form of revenue for the federal government is tariffs. And so as president of the federal government, he does realize we need to have tariffs, but not a 45% tariff. And you can pitch a fit, but you better not nullify and lead to disunion. Okay. He says that is just not the answer. That's too extreme, South Carolina. Okay. And so Calhoun, his vice president, is against all tariffs again, because South Carolina, they don't have the industry. Okay. And he believes that South Carolina or the tariffs hurt the South. Okay. And it also reduces the need for U.S. cotton because it also means that other countries have to pay a tariff on us too. So people aren't going to buy cotton from other countries, from us. So nullification is, again, part of that compact theory that each state can vote the legislature to null and void a unfair federal law. Again, Calhoun, in parentheses there, just put VP. He is the VP for Jackson during all this time. And remember, I told you, Jackson will support states' rights, but not if it leads to disunion, meaning like you can't just null and void. Like, I'm all about you protesting, but you cannot nullify. Okay, that is too much. So what's going to happen is Calhoun will write an anonymous pamphlet called South Carolina Exposition and Protest. Okay, and it basically says how this law is unfair, this tariff is unfair, and that the South should nullify it. Okay, no other states will support him, but again, it's all anonymous right now. Also in 1830, there is a debate in Congress, and it's a debate about nullification. Okay, you have Daniel Webster, who's from New England. So, of course, New England, there's a lot of industry. Would he like a tariff? Heck yes, he would. And he believes that nullification is treason. Okay. So, if you vote to ignore a federal law, that is treason. Okay. That is what Daniel Webster, a Northerner, says. Okay. So he's all about the Union is number one. Your region is number two. Okay. Robert Hayne is from South Carolina. How do you think he feels about this tariff? Definitely against it. And he says that the South is a victim of tariff laws. Okay. And that nullification is necessary. So again, make sure you know the Webster-Hayne debate is a debate in Congress about nullification. And Webster from up north says nullification is treason. Okay. Hayne from South Carolina says nullification is our right. Okay. So what's going to happen is Congress will draft a new tariff and approve of it. Jackson will sign into law called the Tariff of 1832. It lowered the tariff from 45% to 35%, which is a nice decrease. But is that okay for South Carolina and John C. Calhoun? No, it's not low enough. Okay. And of course, it was hated by the South because, again, it's like the only good tariff is 0% tariff. Okay. And so Jackson will also learn of the criticism of, so just around this time, Calhoun will come clean about the South Carolina Exposition protest. So that's awkward between the president and vice president. Also, during James Monroe's presidency, Secretary of War for James Monroe is John C. Calhoun, and he actually criticized General Jackson's stuff, especially how he did with the like certain things and just wanted to be punished. So that's really awkward. And again, Calhoun's going to admit about that pamphlet. Okay. And there is something called the Jefferson Day Dinner that you do for Jefferson's birthday in 1830. And you basically have these toasts. Okay. And for instance, Robert Hayne, remember he's from South Carolina, he gives a toast with his wine. He says, the Union of the United States and the sovereignty of the states, meaning like the Union's important, but equally important is the rights of the states. Think nullification. Okay. Andrew Jackson says, our federal union, it must be preserved, meaning like it must be the priority. John C. Calhoun says, the Union next to our liberty, meaning states, the most dear. May we always remember that it can only be preserved by distributing equally the benefits and burdens of the Union. And then Martin Van Buren, who's a member of the Kitchen Cabinet, says, mutual forbearance and reciprocal concession. Through their agency, the Union was established. The patriotic spirit from which they emanated will forever sustain it. So you see, there's a lot of awkwardness where people are saying, no, the Union's first. And some people are saying, no, the states are first. And it's all about nullification with this tariff. Okay. So what's going to happen, and guys, we're almost finished. You will have, and the Union next to liberty. That's the blank right there. Okay. So what's going to happen? Okay. So what's going to happen is that Henry Clay, Speaker of the House, steps in one more time, and he comes up with the compromise tariff, also known as the Tariff of 1833. Okay, what it does is it calls for a gradual lowering over a period of 10 years. And it will be lowering down to 25%. So remember, 45% was the original. The 1832 tariff is 35%. And then the one of 1833 says over a 10-year period, we'll take it down to 25%. Okay. And this will prevent secession. I mean, South Carolina, like they voted to nullify the tariff of 1832. They were not okay with it. Okay. So what's going to happen is that Jackson's going to urge Congress to pass the force bill, which luckily it will not actually be into place, hence the bill name of it. But something where people refer to this as the olive branch and the sword, like people in Congress did, because think about it. The olive branch is about peace, okay? And in this case, the peace is the lowering of the tariff, right? But the sword will be what Jackson calls the force bill, where basically he says, look, if we're going to lower this tariff, but you're still going to pay it. And if we need to send the military to occupy South Carolina and force you to pay it, so do it. So he was planning on using the military to go to South Carolina. Luckily, what's going to happen, though, is South Carolina will repeal or rescind their nullification because they realized they were alone. No other state did the same thing, so they will repeal it. Okay, so Calhoun realizes that South Carolina stood alone. Okay. Then what Calhoun's going to do, he will resign from the vice presidency. Okay. And who will Jackson handpick to be the VP? Martin Van Buren. Martin Van Buren was a guy who was really big. He was from New York, so up north. And he was really big on like, he's kind of like, while Jackson is known as like the first Democratic president for the Democratic Party, he's considered like the guy who created the Democratic Party. Like think about like the guy who like really is all about letting people know about this new Democrat Party and providing lots of brochures and pamphlets and campaigning for just the Democrat Party. That's going to be Martin Van Buren. Okay. So yeah, the election of 1832, Jackson runs against anti-Masonic, a third party, doesn't get many things there, and Henry Clay, a national Republican. If you look there, Andrew Jackson still wins. Okay, so now that's it for notes.